It was 1:30 in the morning on January 1st, 2026, and more than 100 people had packed into this popular spot in Crans, Montana, a luxury ski resort nestled in the Swiss Alps. Young people from all over Europe had gathered here to celebrate the new year, to dance, to drink, to toast to new beginnings. No one could have imagined that within minutes, this celebration would become one of Switzerland's deadliest tragedies. La Constellation wasn't just any bar. It had been a fixture in Crans, Montana for at least 40 years, and it was the kind of place where locals and tourists mixed freely. The venue could hold 300 people, with its wooden interiors creating a warm, cozy atmosphere that drew crowds every night. By day, it served as a cafe, but when the sun went down, it transformed into the beating heart of the resort's nightlife. The bar featured 14 TV screens for watching football matches, a shisha lounge, and a smoking area. All of it designed to keep guests entertained until 2 in the morning. This particular night was special. New Year's Eve at a Swiss ski resort meant the place was packed with an international crowd. Swiss locals, French tourists, Italian vacationers, and visitors from across Europe had all converged on this one spot, ready to ring in 2026 in style. Among them was 19-year-old Tahiris dos Santos, a promising footballer from FC Metz's youth academy. He'd come up to the mountains with friends for a few days of vacation before returning to training. Also in the crowd was 26-year-old Ilana Chur, who worked at a local sushi restaurant and had brought his best friend along for the celebration. There was 16-year-old Axel Clavier from Paris, surrounded by his group of friends, all of them laughing and dancing as midnight passed and the new year arrived. The bar's signature touch was something that guests either loved or found concerning. Waitresses would carry champagne bottles topped with sparklers, navigating through the crowd while flames flickered just centimeters from the wooden ceiling. On promotional videos posted months earlier, you could see women in motorcycle helmets delivering these flaming bottles to tables, the sparklers creating a dazzling show in the dimly lit space. It was theatrical, it was exciting, and according to witness accounts, it was what started the nightmare. Around 1:30 in the morning, a male bartender lifted a female bartender onto his shoulders. She was holding a champagne bottle with a lit candle or sparkler on top, and as they moved through the packed crowd, the flame came dangerously close to the wooden ceiling. 2 women who were inside that night later told French broadcaster BFM TV exactly what they saw. The waitress had the flaming bottle just centimeters from the ceiling when the wood caught fire. What happened next unfolded with terrifying speed. The ceiling ignited almost instantly. Because everything was made of wood, the flames spread like a living thing, racing across the surface above everyone's heads. Within seconds, the entire ceiling was ablaze, and the fire was moving so fast that people barely had time to react. The cozy wooden interior that had made the bar feel warm and inviting had become a death trap. Thick black smoke began filling the space, making it impossible to see or breathe. Panic erupted immediately. People started screaming, pushing, trying to find a way out. But La Constellation had a layout that became deadly in an emergency. The main bar area was in a basement level, connected to the ground floor by narrow staircases and tight passageways. Hundreds of people were now trying to funnel through these choke points at once, and the smoke was making everything worse. Witnesses later described feeling like they were suffocating, unable to see more than a few feet in front of them. 16-year-old Axel Clavier found himself trapped in the chaos. At first, he tried hiding behind a table, hoping the fire would somehow be contained. But the smoke kept getting thicker, and the heat kept intensifying. He made a split-second decision. He ran upstairs and grabbed a table, using it to smash through a plexiglass window. The window fell out of its casing, and he scrambled through, losing his jacket, shoes, phone, and bank card in his desperate escape. Later, when speaking to reporters, he would say with profound gratitude that, while he'd lost all his belongings, he was still alive, and that's all that mattered. Ilana Chur wasn't as fortunate. He made it out of the building, but his best friend didn't. He later described the scene to Reuters as being like a horror movie. He held his friend in his arms, trying desperately to revive her alongside firefighters and police officers who had rushed to the scene. But despite everyone's efforts, she was gone. The memory of that moment, of holding his friend as life slipped away, would haunt him forever. Tahiris dos Santos, the young footballer from FC Metz, suffered severe burns to his forehead and hands. The flames had engulfed him before he could escape, leaving him with injuries so serious that he had to be airlifted by plane to a hospital in Germany for specialized treatment. His club later released a statement saying that the entire organization was in shock and united in sending their thoughts to Tahiris as he fought through the pain. The fire didn't just burn, it created what firefighting experts call a flashover. This happens when a fire releases so many combustible gases into a confined space that everything ignites at once. Survivors reported hearing loud pops and bangs that sounded like explosions. These weren't bombs or terrorist devices, as authorities would later confirm. They were the sounds of a fire so intense that it was causing materials to explode from the heat. The flashover meant that anyone still trapped inside faced an inferno, where temperatures could reach over 1,000 degrees. Emergency services received the first calls at exactly 1:30 in the morning. Within minutes, the response was massive and coordinated. 10 helicopters, 40 ambulances, and 150 emergency responders descended on Crans, Montana. Police cordoned off the entire area and established a no-fly zone over the resort to give air ambulances clear access. The injured were so numerous and so severely burned that the local hospital's intensive care unit hit full capacity almost immediately. Patients had to be transported to hospitals across Switzerland and even into neighboring countries. The University Hospital of Zurich, which specializes in burn injuries, received more than a dozen victims. The University Hospital of Lausanne took in 22 patients with severe burns. 3 victims were transported all the way to Milan's Niguarda Hospital in Italy. Some injuries were so extensive that victims couldn't be identified by sight. Authorities would have to rely on DNA samples and dental records, a process that could take days or even weeks. As dawn broke over Crans, Montana on January 1st, the full scope of the tragedy became clear. Around 40 people were dead. 115 were injured, many of them fighting for their lives in burn units across multiple countries. The victims represented the international character of the resort. Swiss residents, French nationals, Italian tourists, and visitors from across Europe. At least 13 Italians were among the wounded, with 16 Italians reported missing by their embassy. 9 French nationals were injured, with 8 unaccounted for. The youngest victims were teenagers, with at least 22 of the seriously injured falling between the ages of 16 and 26. If this story has you questioning how something like this could happen in a modern establishment, hit that subscribe button. These stories need to be told, and your engagement ensures we can keep investigating the failures that lead to preventable tragedies. Drop a comment below telling us what questions you want answered about this case. Swiss President Guy Parmelin, speaking on his very first day in office, addressed the nation with visible emotion. He said that what should have been a moment of joy had turned into mourning that touched the entire country and beyond. He announced that flags would fly at half-mast for 5 days and that the investigation would uncover the exact circumstances of this incident because they owed it to the victims, their families, and all Swiss citizens. The message was clear. A tragedy of this scale must never happen again. But as investigators began their work, troubling details about Le Constellation started to emerge. The bar had been acquired and remodeled back in 2015 by a married couple from Corsica, who operated several establishments in the region. The wife was inside the venue when the fire started and suffered burns to her arm before escaping in what witnesses described as complete shock. Her husband was at another of their businesses at the time. Online reviews of Le Constellation painted a concerning picture. On evaluation platforms, the bar had scored only 6.5 out of 10 points in the safety category. Guests had complained about poor treatment of staff, lack of professionalism, and most ominously, security deficiencies. These weren't just random complaints. They represented a pattern of concerns that, in hindsight, looked like warning signs that went unheeded. The investigation, led by Valais Canton Attorney General Beatrice Pillaut, immediately ruled out terrorism. She told reporters that at no moment was there any question of an attack. Instead, investigators were focusing on how the fire started and why it spread so catastrophically fast. The working theory was that a general fire caused a flashover, leading to one or multiple explosions. But determining the exact sequence of events would require painstaking forensic work. Specialist investigators from Zurich's Forensic Institute had been brought in to examine the wreckage, but they couldn't even enter the building at first because it was too unstable. Witness after witness described seeing waitresses carrying champagne bottles with sparklers or candles, holding them too close to the wooden ceiling. But Pillaud was careful not to confirm anything prematurely. She said that many witnesses had been interviewed, and cell phones recovered from the scene would be analyzed to piece together a timeline. The investigation had been opened not against any specific person, but to illuminate the circumstances of this fire. Local student Thomas Diaz, who had been to La Constellation many times before, came to lay flowers at a makeshift memorial that sprang up near the bar. He was still waiting to hear from two friends who had been inside that night. He told reporters that escape would have been a nightmare for anyone trapped inside, with hundreds of people having to funnel up the narrow staircase from the basement to the ground floor. The layout of the bar, which had seemed charming in normal circumstances, had become a bottleneck when everyone needed to escape at once. The community of Crans, Montana, a town of 10,000 residents perched 25 miles north of the famous Matterhorn, was in shock. This wasn't just any ski resort. It was one of the top venues on the World Cup circuit in alpine skiing and was scheduled to host the Alpine World Ski Championships in February 2027. In just 4 weeks, the resort was supposed to welcome the world's best downhill racers, including Lindsey Vonn, for their final competitions before the Milan Cortina Olympics. Now, instead of preparing for celebration, the town was mourning. As night fell on January 1st, hundreds of people gathered silently in the streets near La Constellation. Police tape and small grottos of candles marked the area where the bar stood. People laid flowers, lit candles, and held each other as they wept. Many were young. The bar had been particularly popular with 16 to 25-year-olds, which meant that an entire generation of the resort's youth had been affected. Some were grieving friends. Others were searching desperately for missing loved ones. Pier Marco Pani, an 18-year-old, told Reuters that the tragedy had shattered any sense of safety. He said, "You think you're safe in a place like this, but it can happen anywhere, and the victims were people just like them." That sentiment captured what made this disaster so particularly haunting. These weren't people taking risks or engaging in dangerous activities. They were young people celebrating the new year at a bar that was supposed to be safe, in a resort town known for its high standards and careful regulation. Italian families descended on Crans, Montana, desperately searching for their children. One father, identified only as Eduardo, told Italian television that his minor son hadn't answered his phone since the night before. The boy had been at the club doing New Year's Eve with a group of friends, and despite calling every hospital, the family still hadn't found him. The father had rushed to the spot with his wife, describing the situation as completely daunting. These scenes repeated across multiple nationalities as families realized their loved ones might have been inside when the fire erupted. A woman from Milan interviewed by Italian media said that many of the young people present in the club simply couldn't be found. She explained that with 115 injured spread across hospitals in Geneva, Lausanne, Zurich, and even across borders, families were calling every facility trying to locate their children. But some kids were just missing, with no record of them at any hospital. The city, she said, was suspended in a kind of collective holding of breath, with people walking around crying, unsure whether their friends were dead, injured, or somehow miraculously unharmed. The medical response had been extraordinary, but also revealed how overwhelmed the system had become. Dr. Jacopo Pernicelle from Valle d'Aosta, who responded with a civil defense helicopter, described facing a catastrophic situation, but being part of a well-oiled rescue system. He said they managed a continuous flow of injured patients with burns and crush trauma, operating in an orderly and calm manner despite the chaos. His testimony highlighted both the professionalism of Swiss emergency services and the sheer scale of casualties they were dealing with. Matthias Reynard, president of the Valais State Council, called the tragedy a nightmare that shattered what should have been a celebration and coming together. He said the sheer number of victims had blindsided everyone, requiring resources on a scale they'd never had to mobilize before. In a region busy with tourists skiing on the slopes, authorities made an unusual plea to the local population. Please show extra caution in the coming days to avoid any accidents that could require medical resources that were already overwhelmed. The message was stark. The healthcare system was at its breaking point. The international response was immediate. King Charles III of the United Kingdom sent a message saying that he and his wife were appalled and greatly saddened by the fire. French President Emmanuel Macron shared his deep emotion and conveyed France's full solidarity and fraternal support to Switzerland. Italian Foreign Minister Antonio Tajani immediately dispatched embassy staff to the scene and set up a crisis unit to track Italian citizens. The U.S. Embassy in Bern expressed deep sadness and assured American citizens that consular officials stood ready to provide assistance. This investigation is just beginning, and there are serious questions about safety standards, oversight, and accountability that need answers. Subscribe to this channel so you don't miss updates as this story develops. Hit that like button if you think negligence played a role here, and share this video. Because when 40 people die in what should have been a safe celebration, we can't just move on. We need to demand that every nightclub, every bar, every venue learns from this tragedy so it never happens again. As investigators continue their work, one question hangs over everything. How could this happen? The Constellation had been operating for decades. Switzerland is known for strict safety regulations and high standards. Yet on New Year's Eve 2025, in one of the world's most exclusive ski resorts, a fire spread so fast through a crowded bar that 40 people died and 115 were injured before anyone could stop it. The answer likely lies in a combination of factors that created perfect conditions for disaster. The wooden interior that made the bar feel cozy also made it highly flammable. The sparklers, or candles on champagne bottles, that created atmosphere also created ignition sources dangerously close to combustible materials. The basement layout that gave the bar its intimate vibe also created a bottleneck when everyone tried to escape at once. The popularity of the venue that made it a successful business also meant it was packed beyond safe capacity when the fire started. But beyond the physical factors, there were the human ones. The online reviews mentioning security deficiencies that apparently went unaddressed. The safety score of 6.5 out of 10 that should have raised red flags. The practice of having staff carry open flames through crowds and near wooden ceilings, a tradition that prioritized spectacle over safety. Each of these elements alone might not have been enough to cause a tragedy, but together, they created a cascade of failures that turned a New Year's celebration into a mass casualty event. The identification process continues, with families waiting in anguish for news. Italy's ambassador to Switzerland said it could take weeks to identify many victims because their burns were so severe. DNA samples are being collected, dental records are being cross-referenced, and forensic teams are working around the clock. But for the families of the missing, every hour that passes without answers is torture. Switzerland has declared 5 days of national mourning. The small alpine nation, known for safety and precision, is grappling with one of the worst tragedies in its modern history. The last comparable incident was back in 2012, when a bus crash in a tunnel near Sierre, less than 3 miles from Crans, Montana, killed 28 people, including many children. Now, 14 years later, the same region is mourning again. The victims of La Constellation represent lives cut short, futures erased, families shattered. They were teenagers celebrating their first adult New Year's Eve. They were young professionals taking a ski vacation. They were locals who had gone to that bar countless times before. They were international tourists experiencing Swiss hospitality. They were sons and daughters, friends and partners, people with dreams and plans, and loved ones waiting for them to come home. As this story continues to unfold, the central question remains unanswered. Was this a tragic accident, or was this preventable negligence? The investigation will determine whether anyone failed in their duty to keep these people safe, whether regulations were ignored, whether warnings were dismissed. For now, a resort town known for joy and celebration has become a place of mourning, and 40 families across Europe are planning funerals instead of continuing their New Year's festivities. The flames that raced across Le Constellation's ceiling that night showed that tragedy can strike anywhere, anytime, even in the safest seeming places. And they left behind questions that demand answers. Because if we can't learn from this, if we can't prevent it from happening again, then those 40 deaths mean nothing at all.